Welcome back to my channel, guys. Today we're going to be touching on the story, the lynching of George Armwood. If you see me looking down, it's because I'm reading from my notes, so I don't forget anything. In the 1930s, the Eastern Shore, Jim Crow was live and well on the Eastern Shore. Angry towards blacks was magnified because Orphan Jones in January of 1932 was convicted of murdering a family of 4 whites. Orphan Jones' lawyer, Bernard Avis, a communist from Baltimore, he got Jones' sentence reversed and drug the case on for many years, making whites angry. In October 1933, the case was still unresolved, and an elderly white woman named Mary Denson said she was attacked by a black man walking home near Princess Anne. She said she ain't know the person but could ID him amongst thousands. Word soon spread of this attack. Soon men from 3 adjoining communities began a manhunt. They were on the hunt for George Armwood, a 22-year-old farm worker who lived near the city. He would come by his family's house smiling, and they said he was always known when he came by for whistling. When he was 15, George left school to live and work with a white man on a nearby farm. He was recognized by many to be feeble-minded, kind of slow. Excuse my French. Should have maybe been in a psychiatric ward. He wasn't, because despite him being slow, he was a good earner and an inexpensive worker to keep. So they just kept him because he could do inexpensive work and he was inexpensive to keep, basically. Mary never ID'd George. He was picked as the attacker. So they basically picked George because he was slow and feeble-minded, and basically she didn't even ID this guy, Mary, and they just picked George as being the attacker. Because it's easy to pick somebody weaker and things of that nature, I guess. But now he was a wanted man. Armed people entered the Armwood house looking for George. They eventually found George in the woods, where they drugged George out of the woods and beat him and tied him to the back of a car and made him walk. In a time of white anger with blacks, it was like lighting a fuse. He was first taken to Princess Anne jail, then to Salisbury, the very place Matthew Williams was lynched not 2 years earlier. As soon as word spread of the Armwoods, angry mobs started to gather outside. It was clear he wasn't safe in Salisbury. Neither so Governor Ritchie ordered the state police to take Armwood away from the shore altogether. Just as Armwood left the back door of the jail, angry mobs entered through the front door. Salisbury, he was taken from Salisbury County, then to Baltimore jail, where it was reported he signed a confession in Baltimore. He was out of the way of the mobs, but it was short-lived. Judge Dewar ordered he be sent to Somerset County Jail. Robbins and Ritchie said days of violence had passed on in Somerset. It was now a peaceful town. Judge Dewar realized if he didn't get Armored back, he would be looked at as weak and he wouldn't really be re-elected as judge in the county. So he had to get him back to the original county. Governor Ritchie was also up for re-election. and agreed to return Armwood at 10 that night. State police left Baltimore with Armwood. As the sun came up October 18th, George Armwood was sitting in a cell in the Princess Anne jail. Everyone on the shore knew of his return, trumped on paper and in the radio. The jail attracted mobs of angry people. There were guards, but only 25 guards, and they were outnumbered by thousands of angry people with the mob. Reports of civil unrest reached Governor Ritchie. Called Robbins and Dewar as they assured him that Armwood was safe, but kept growing. The mob kept growing. By 7, Dewar went to the jail to address the mob. Let the law handle this, he stated. And the judge left after he spoke, thinking that everything was at calm and ease. But no sooner than he left, the mob outnumbered police, and a fight ensued with the mob and the police. The mob threw objects at the jail, and the cops had guns but never fired a shot. Instead, they just fought with hand-to-hand combat against the mobs. Eventually, the mobs outnumbered the police and the troops, and then the mob used the object to break down the door to the jail, and they got in to where they found George hiding under a mat in his cell, and they drug him outside. He was already had a noose around his neck. They beat him. Then a 18-year-old boy cut off the ear and waved it to the crowd. Men and women cheered as they beat him. Armwood was then tied and dragged from the back of a pickup truck, then hung from a tree, where he was hung for 5 minutes until he died. Then they drug his body around for everyone to see. Then the crowd took him up in front of the courthouse, where he was later burned and set on fire, with people singing around his dead corpse and laughing, children, women, and men. After that, then his body was dumped in front of a lumber yard, where it laid there for 4 hours. The judge and governor didn't think Black lives really meant things at that time. That's why this happened. And Ritchie, the governor, put the blame all on Dewar and Robinson. Judge Dewar said sorry. He was mistaken in his judgment. Robin had no statement about the whole incident, but it was a stain on Maryland state and the governor. 9 suspects were ID'd, but none of them were brought to justice because at that time the state's attorney, which was Robin, refused to prosecute any people. Effect declared martial law, set Maryland to Salisbury. It was armed militia, the leader of a lynch mob. Locals tried to prevent the militia from taking the suspects and placing them under arrest. They didn't succeed. The state's attorney, Robin, said, Judge, when they did get the 3 people, I guess, that were wrapped up into this somehow, Robin then stated he doesn't have any evidence to convict these people that the locals tried to keep out. And then they eventually did get brought to justice, but the locals tried to deny them entry, but they were brought to justice. And when the 3 or 4 guys were brought to justice, State's Attorney Robin said he doesn't have any evidence to even convict these people, in which the case was thrown out. Just a little lost history, and sorry if I bounced around or left some things out, but I gotta try to find a way to condense when I take my research and things like that. But this is just another case in point where justice was never served and basically swept under the rug. They pinned it on a guy which was slower and maybe had mental illness issues just because he was the scapegoat. And you see, justice was never served. Okay, and this was the story of the lynching of George Armwood.